we bring the meeting to order, please? And I'd like to start tonight by congratulating Councillor David Simmonds on his election to Parliament. Well done, David. I have to say we were expecting apologies for absence, but as he is sitting on the benches of the many, not the few, they were able to let him out to join us today. Okay, could we start with apologies for absence, please?
Yes, Chairman. Apologies from Councillor Susan O'Brien.
Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest in matters before us this evening? Councillor Curling. Thank you, Councillor Curling. Third item on the agenda, to approve the minutes of the last Cabinet meeting, pages 1 to 12. Are they agreed? Thank you. In which case, I confirm that the items of business marked Part 1 will be considered in public, and the items of business marked Part 2 will be considered in private. All items tonight are in Part 1, the public section. So we'll commence with agenda item 5, the monthly council budget monitoring report, month 7, page 13. Councillor Bianco.
Thank you, Leader. Well, as you rightly said, this is month 7, which is October. We are now just over halfway through the year, and we are showing a net year underspend of 610,000, which is a good step. And it's a slight improvement on the previous month's position of 19,000, and that leads to a projection of reserves of just over 33 million at the year end in 31st of March 2020. So it's a steady as you go sort of report, and whilst there are lots of bits in here that no doubt, well, some of which I'm sure you'll point to, there is of course a slightly more significant financial agenda item a bit further down the list, which I'm sure will gain much more interest than this particular one. I think on that point I will move the 5 recommendations, so the 3 at the bottom of page 13 and the 2 at the top of page 14, and leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bianco. As you say, the recommendations before us, number 1 is to note the budget position at October, month 7. It's outlined in table 1 on page 16. To note the Treasury Management Update as at October 2019 at Appendix E, that's on page 52, and as usual, paragraph 154, the important one, there were no breaches of the prudential indicators or non-compliance with the Treasury Management Policy and Practices during the period under review. Recommendation 3 is to continue the delegated authority to myself and the Chief Executive regarding the approval of a consultancy and agency assignments that total over £50,000, and details of those are shown on page 54. Recommendation 4, this is to approve to charge a London affordable rent on 3 developments: Meadowfield House, West End Road, Ruislip, and Otterfield Road, West Drayton. Now, the HRA acquisition of new build flats at Meadowfield House and West End Road and Otterfield Road were approved on the financial viability assumption that these properties would be charged at the London affordable rent, and that is exactly what this recommendation is suggesting, and the figures are there for you to see. Recommendation 5 is to agree, subject to a bid being successful, to approve the acceptance of a grant funding £74,502 from the Mayor of London's Small Projects and Equipment Fund to finance investment in adult community learning services ICT equipment. This involves match funding from ourselves, but yes, of course, if we are successful, we would accept the £74,000 match funding. So those are the 5 recommendations. As you mentioned, Councillor Bianco, we are ahead of the game at this stage. Our general fund balances are expected to total over 33 million at the year end, which is very good, because that is the starting point of what will be the next paper that we will be looking at. So all in all, a pretty strong position to be in at this time of the financial year. Are the recommendations agreed? Agreed. Thank you. In which case, could we move to agenda item 6, which is on the B agenda papers? And this is the Council's budget medium-term financial forecast for the years 2020-21, 2024-25. Councillor Bianco.
Thank you, Leader. This, as you rightly say, is the proposed budget for next year, and the medium-term forecast thereafter. And it shows that we are in a good position going forward. We will continue to provide all the services we currently provide, and I think that's a very important message, and I'm sure it's one you're going to reinforce very shortly, as well as, again, looking at new things that we can do for our residents. Now, as is always the case, I get to make a rather lengthy speech on the subject towards the end of February, and I therefore restrain myself from making too many comments here now. So I'm just going to move the recommendations on page 2 and leave you, Leader, to make the general comments.
Thank you, Councillor Bianco. Well, as you will recall, last year was the 13th consecutive year that the Council froze council tax for residents over the age of 65, and the 4th consecutive year that we did not levy the social care precept, set at 2 or 3% of council tax over that period. For residents under the age of 65, council tax rose by 2.4%, the lowest rate of all London boroughs. And we base that on 90% of the average rise of our neighbouring councils, Ealing, Harrow and Hounslow, for the previous year, 2018-19. As regards the coming financial year, the Council will once again freeze council tax for the 14th consecutive year for residents over 65. If we applied the same 90% of neighbouring boroughs' previous year rise once again for all other residents, you would get a total rise of 2.7%. However, given that the maximum rise allowed this year is 2%, we are assuming that most London boroughs will levy that, so our draft budget includes a proposed rise of 1.8%, 90% of the 2%. In the past years, as I've said, we've not needed to levy the social care precept. However, adult social care services, not just in Hillingdon, but across the country, are facing significant funding pressures due to a combination of growing and ageing population and increasingly complex care needs and increases in care costs. Accordingly, for 2021, we will levy a precept of 2% on all residents, which in practice will mean a total rise of 3.8% for those under the age of 65, amounting to 83p a week rise on a Band D property, and 2% for those over the age of 65, 44p a week rise for a Band D property. As you said, Councillor Bianco, everything continues. All the expenditure that we currently spend, all services are continuing. I would draw Cabinet attention to page 14 of the budget paper, where we look at balances and reserves. As I said, the starting point, our projected balances are £33 million to start this period. We don't only set a budget for next year, we are looking at the years following that, so we keep tabs on that as well. And what we're suggesting is that at the end of this period that we are looking at, we will still have just under £24 million in balances. And given the record that we've got so far on user balances, that is pretty likely to happen. I'd also draw attention to paragraph 46, where we talked about earmark reserves, as well as those 33 million in balances. We will start the year with nearly 22 million, a further 22 million in earmark reserves for various things. And part of that will be 633,000 of that will be earmarked to manage the costs of responding to Heathrow's airport development consent order, if indeed it gets that far. It is still in the courts. We now have a government that's going to look at the future of that project anyway. But to be on the safe side, and for the absolute avoidance of doubt, and for the benefit of back Heathrow, as well as the 600 odd thousand that we've got for legal cases, we've set aside this money for next year for that development consent order, should it actually kick off. Could I also turn your attention to page 21, where we look at some priority growth areas. 130k for 3 new ASBIT officers, antisocial behaviour environment team. 113k for a planning lawyer. 79k for a lead officer to support the council delivering its duties as a result of the Environment Bill. 60k for patrol officers at Little Britain Lake. 56k for a military history curator to support the work at the Battle of Britain Bunker and across the borough. 55k for the licensing team to support animal welfare as a result of changes to legislation. An additional 50k to strengthen the council's domestic violence support. And moving on to page 28, there's masses more in here, but as you say, Councillor Bianco will have an opportunity in February to deal with it. But I just wanted to highlight a few things on page 28. Top of the page, Uxbridge Police Station, purchase of the Uxbridge Police Station, £5 million. That remains something that we would like to see happen. We regard it as essential, and it's something that we will budget for, and I will, after Christmas, be pressing the Deputy Mayor for Policing to look seriously at that. They haven't, to give them credit, thrown it out unceremoniously as they did last time. They said they would consider it, given the increasing police numbers, but I haven't heard since I last wrote to them. Also included on here, sports club refurbishment. This is new. We propose to invest £3,750,000 in sports clubs across the borough to promote health and well-being of our residents. We have, as Cabinet is aware, been investing in things like bowls clubs. We will now invest in other sports facilities for all age groups across the borough. We've having £2.5 million, 2.6 million, for Cranford Park as part of a lottery bid to regenerate historic buildings there. Youth provision, we have been providing £500,000 a year, and that was due to finish this year. This is for things like scout facilities, guide facilities, facilities for youth. That has been so successful that we put in another £2.5 million to carry that forward over the next 5 years as well. Something new this year, environmental projects, £1.75 million. We want to invest in a number of things, including pollution screens, anti-pollution screens around schools to try and stop the effect of pollution from fumes in schools that are adjacent to busy roads. The shopping parade initiatives will continue. That again has been a successful initiative. 8 different sites are included over the term of this medium-term forecast. Highway structural works, continuing investment at £8 million a year, but £10 million in 2021, this is to include pavements as well, of course. And other investments in things like the Battle of Britain Bunker, and this is the bunker itself, not the museum above it. And continued investment in CCTV. An extremely detailed and thorough programme, and as you rightly said, we'll say more about it in Cabinet in February. Councillor Simmonds, did you want to speak?
Well, thank you, Leader. You received my resignation as Deputy Leader of the Conservative Group earlier on this evening, and therefore this will be my last meeting as a member of the Cabinet in the capacity I currently hold, with a new Deputy Leader due to be appointed at full council in January. I simply wanted to say, in respect to this budget, I hope business elsewhere permitting to be there to be part of voting it through the council in February. But one of the things that's really encouraging is I'm very conscious that the issue of local government finance is on the minds of a lot of the new people who've arrived at Westminster. And the budgets that Hillingdon enjoys are, dare I say, the envy of many who are sitting in that other place. And this budget, I think, continues to demonstrate that Hillingdon Conservatives have the borough very firmly in safe hands when it comes to providing good financial stability. And so I hope to be there to vote it through, but I will make sure that as far as I possibly can, I share that story with as many colleagues as possible and encourage them to follow the example that's been set by this administration. And on that note, I'd like to just thank colleagues around the Cabinet table. Having been a member of this now for 17 years, there are life sentences shorter than that. I wish you the very best for the future without me.
Thank you very much, Councillor Simmonds, and I trust you will be doing something about the length of life sentences. That's one of the other,
Going up
another hat on. The recommendations are shown on page 2, recommendations 1 to 6. I didn't mention fees and charges in my summary. They, of course, remain at 90% of what our neighbouring boroughs charge, as best we can do it. There are some that we have to charge less than that because they're rising at such a rate in neighbouring boroughs. It'd be a huge rise if we were to try and keep up with them. But you know, that said, and could I just remind scrutiny as well, this is going to council, so it's not something that we need to spend time on tonight. Are the recommendations 1 to 6 agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much, everybody. Back to Agenda A. Agenda item 7, page 57, grants to Hillingdon's local voluntary organisations 2021 financial year. Councillor Mills.
Thank you, Leader. An annual part of the December Cabinet meeting is the allocation of our voluntary sector grants proposals, and once again this year we are committing ourselves to, in total, in excess of £2 million when you take into account the money for the dining centres and for the transport groups that we are supporting within the recommendations on page 58, 1 to 4, which I duly move. We have a very good voluntary sector throughout the borough who continue to do valuable work, and our council officers try to work very closely with them to ensure that they are focused on the kind of things that we believe is absolutely right for residents of Hillingdon, and overall there's no doubt that they do an excellent job, and that's why we're willing to continue to support so many of them and to give assistance. And we have 2 new entries this year which have come in, which have been given due consideration and are considered worthy of being added to the list, which is on page 70, the United Support Project and the Hillingdon Brain Tumour and Injury Support Group. And so they are now included within our grant handouts. And I think what I find particularly pleasing is that the realisation that local authorities do have to be very careful with resources, but the way in which we have managed our financial affairs over the years continues to give us the capacity and the flexibility to be able to support valuable organisations embedded within our community, and some of them for many, many years, without leaving them completely adrift, as has happened in many other parts of London boroughs. And long may it continue. So I move the recommendations and hope for another year of continued good voluntary work on behalf of the residents.
4 recommendations, are they agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Just wait for Councillor Curling to return. Agenda item 8, page 149, adoption of the local plan, part 2. Councillor Burrows.
Thank you, Leader. The highlight of the evening, because we will go through page by page, obviously, of the appendices, which I'm sure everybody has read. And I will point out the site specifics on the map that is kindly being put behind me here. This, everybody will be relieved to know, is our final move to adopt the local plan part 2. It's taken many years to get here. It's taken many hours of officers' time, for which I would like to thank them. But we are finally here, following the inspector's report, as saying our plan is now sound and can move forward. We have looked at the inspector's report, and taken into account is modifications and also the council's own minor modifications. And this will now come to full council for adoption, and that is one of the recommendations. There are 6 recommendations on page 150, and one of them is recommend to full council the adoption of this local plan. Obviously, we could choose not to adopt it. Hopefully, nobody is going to, because that means we're back to square one. And we would have to go with the saved UDP policies, which first adopted in 1998, which we know is no longer consistent with national and regional policies. This is an extremely good piece of work, as you can see from the actual document itself. I feel like I've lived it over the years. It's about 5-6 years now. So I will move the recommendations on page 150 and hope my Cabinet colleagues agree with me that officers of this council should be congratulated on getting this policy through, where other councils have failed with the inspectors. This just shows what good officers we have within our planning department and within this council, taking into account our residents every single time and putting our residents first when we come to produce these documents to protect them. So, with that said, I move the recommendations, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Burrows. Councillor Mills.
Thank you. It is a very weighty document, and in planning terms, of course, is fundamental to the way in which we ensure that this borough develops and achieves the balance that we wish to see between development and existing preservation of all the features in a borough like Hillingdon that we want. And I fully support the document. I think the point has to be made, though, that this is an exercise that we began in 2013. And I think that this has become an industry. And now that we have in our presence a member of Parliament, it's one of the things that needs to be taken back, because this cannot be the right way forward to actually arrive at the kind of decisions that we need to arrive at. And there has to be a simplified way of achieving the same kind of outcomes, because we've had 2 London mayors during this period, so the regional plan is already in conflict with our local plan, and thankfully not in this local authority, but in many local authorities, they would have had 3 different administrations during the same period that the plans are being constructed. And none of this can actually be really in the long term constructive for the way in which we make planning decisions. And I think it is one of the fundamental problems in terms of the issues that we've got about achieving fair balance on supply and demand, and making sure that our environment is protected and the right number of housing units are provided. So this is an excellent piece of work, but it can't be the answer going forward in the 21st century, and government need to address it.
Thank you, Councillor Mills. Councillor Cawthorne indicated.
Yes, I did. I just wanted to comment briefly on an adult social care aspect, and that's the provision for older people's accommodation. That is something that the MHCLG published guidance on this year. 90% of local authorities take no account of that in their local plans, and I'm delighted that is in our report. It helps us to build on all that we're achieving in that regard, and it's very much to be welcomed. So, just that comment. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. Are the recommendations agreed? Thank you. Agenda item 9, page 159, Hillingdon Homeless Prevention and Rough Sleeping Review and Strategy. Councillor Cawthorne.
Thank you, Leader. Back to me, and you'll recall, Leader, back in 2017 we committed to an early review of this strategy to reflect the requirements of the Homelessness Reduction Act, and of course also we've had subsequently the publication by the MHCLG, the Rough Sleeping Strategy, and that I think renders this especially timely and appropriate. This has given us the opportunity to build, I think, on the progress we've made in this area, which is set out on pages 161 and 162, not least the establishment of a resettlement team to build more effective links between homeless households and the private sector. And I would add that we've also made some significant progress too with provision for rough sleepers, not only moving into more settled accommodation, but also taking account of their health needs as well, and beyond that. This has been through a thorough consultation process. The responses have been broadly supportive all the way through, as has been the Policy and Overview Committee. There are some minor changes referred to in the report, and they're picked up in the recommendations. I will also say that I was very pleased with the level of participation from our partner organisations. Too many for me to reel off here, but I'm delighted with that. It does underline the value and the importance of partnership in delivering these essential services. I would like to convey my thanks to the officer team for doing a first-rate job here, and let's not forget the frontline staff who do an excellent job in challenging circumstances dealing with some of this client group. Finally, I'll move the recommendations set out on page 160, which invite us to firstly pick up the minor amendments in approving the review and strategy and moving forward for an update to the plan on an annual basis. I so move. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Coulson. Are those recommendations agreed? Thank you very much. So that brings us to the end of the formal agenda. So can I finish by, again, congratulating Councillor Simmonds. He has a 17-year apprenticeship to take forward into his new career, so I'm sure he's going to do extremely well. But thanks for all your service to Cabinet, David. It's much appreciated. And finally, could I wish all members and officers a happy Christmas and a healthy New Year. Thank you.